There are still many folks who are not satisfied by the outcome of the 2020 election. And when you have candidates and powerful voices within the party, namely former President Trump, continuing to push conspiracy.
These elections are rigged. Our elections are totally rigged.
It does do real damage to how a segment of the country views our elections process.
Nobody will ever convince me that the election wasn't stolen. I will never, ever accept that the election wasn't stolen.
Something that should be pretty nonpartisan, the integrity of our elections, has become a partisan issue. Overall, 61% of Americans think that Joe Biden was legitimately elected in 2020. Republicans disproportionately believe that he wasn't legitimately elected. Even of the entire public, that's 38%. 38% of people thinking that the person who sits in the White House is illegitimate. That's a big concern.
We're interested to see exactly how this all plays out in 2024 because there are still folks, despite the fact that we know that there was no widespread election fraud in the 2020 election, are still holding on to that.
The feedback loop that's been happening is that Donald Trump says the 2020 election was stolen. His voters believe him, and then that is filtering down to other races like Senate, House, and Governor.
Americans instinctively know there was something wrong with this election.
Over 400,000 mail-in ballots were altered, switched from President Trump to Vice President Biden.
They know that this election is not right, and as their representative, I am sent here to represent them.
We at 538, we canvassed all Republican candidates for Senate, Governor, House, Attorney General, and Secretary of State in 2022, and we found that 36% of them fully denied the results of the 2020 election. An additional 11% kind of were casting doubts on it. So basically, in total, about half of Republican nominees that year were people who at least questioned or outright denied the results of the election.
But Democrats really have not engaged on the issue of election integrity in the same way that Republicans have. There is a feeling that our elections were already secure, that the 2020 election was one of the most secure elections that we've ever had.
All of this conversation about what we need to do is to make voting secure. It was secure. We're going to make voting safe. It was safe. We don't have aliens coming to vote in Michigan and other parts of the country.
From the Democrat side of things, what I'm seeing more is talk of the idea of voter access.
So after the 2020 election, we saw a record-breaking number of voting restrictions that passed. 52 new voting restrictions passed in 2021, and so this included things like restrictions on absentee voting, new voter ID laws. That has continued here in 2023, for example. We've seen 16 states tighten their voting laws. But the interesting thing is 26 states have actually made it easier to vote here in 2023, and that includes things like automatic voter registration. Before the pandemic, there were only 5 states that voted predominantly by mail, and now there are 8 states that do that. You have seen both an expansion and a restriction of voting laws. Voting laws were already very different state to state, but we've seen that diverge even more. So, blue states really do vote pretty differently now from red states in terms of like the method of the vote.
The notion of a large segment of our electorate, a large segment of America, not having faith that the elections were fair, that the elections were free, is something that we have not confronted before. Some would say that democracy is really on the line. I know that that's something that President Biden has continued to campaign on.
We can't let the integrity of our elections be undermined, for that is a path to chaos.
This sort of conspiracy about how our elections work could do real damage to the fabric of our democracy, right? If folks don't trust the outcomes of our elections, how can we get them to participate? How can democracy truly function?